I'm Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Rhode Island. Thank you very much for coming. I'm very pleased to have two guests, panelists, with us to talk about legislative advocacy. To my far right is Representative June Speakman.
Sorry to interrupt.
To everybody else's far left is Representative State Representative from District 68, Bristol Warren. She is now serving her fourth term in the General Assembly, and she's been a great advocate for civil rights and civil liberties in her time there. Next to her is Vimala Phongsavanh. She was, for a number of years, the Senior Director of External Affairs for Planned Parenthood Votes, Rhode Island, and she was up at the State House just about every day, helping advocate on some very important civil liberties issues. Let me start with a few announcements, and then we'll get right into the program. First, I want to know there are two exits in case there's an emergency. The one that you came from, you can see exits over here. The bathrooms are in the corner over there if you go out the door. I want you to know that this is being recorded so that we can post it online for people who weren't able to attend. I hope everybody is comfortable with that. We'd like to thank the Cranston Public Library, and particularly Allison and Zach, for helping us get this space and hold this event. Most of you have handouts which have some documents that will sort of follow some of what you're going to be hearing this morning during our program. And in terms of format, there are particular sections of the program where we're going to stop and take up to 3 questions and then move on to the next program, because we want to make sure we get through everything. But there will also be time at the end for questions. So if you're not able to ask immediately, you have a pen and paper. Feel free to write it down so you remember it, and we can take it from there. If anybody has trouble hearing me, just raise your hand at some point. Hopefully, I'll be able to get through this without completely losing my voice. So again, thank you very much for coming. The first question to ask is, why bother? Why are you here? I think I have a general idea, but about a century ago, Will Rogers had a comment that I've always liked. He said, "This country has come to feel the same when Congress is in session as we do when the baby gets hold of a hammer. It's just a question of how much damage you can do before we take it away from it." And that's sort of what we're dealing with at this time in the country. We have a Congress that is not concerned about civil rights and civil liberties. We have a president who is not concerned about civil rights and civil liberties. And unfortunately, we have a U.S. Supreme Court that is not concerned about civil rights and civil liberties. That might make one throw up one hand and say, why bother? What can we do? And one point I'd like to stress every time I talk about advocacy is how important it is at the state and local level. People spend too much time worrying, wondering what Congress is going to do, what D.C. is going to do. But at the end of the day, the rights you have are dependent on what happens at your state level and at your municipal level. I just want to give one quick example, and then we'll get right into the program of what you can do to help. A perfect example of that is the issue of abortion. In 1973, the United States Supreme Court in Roe v. Wade declared that the right to an abortion was a constitutional right. Great. What happened? 2 months after that decision, the Rhode Island Assembly passed a law declaring that life begins at conception and criminalizing abortion. Didn't matter what the U.S. Supreme Court had done. Now, the ACLU went into court, we got it struck down. But for the next 25 years, the General Assembly kept on passing unconstitutional anti-abortion laws. So the fact that there was this decision, this pronouncement from the highest court in the land that people had this right, didn't necessarily mean that it was going to get exercised without advocacy at the state level. And it's true with just the converse. 2 years ago, the United States Supreme Court reversed Roe versus Wade, took away the right to an abortion. What happened? The state passed a law codifying Roe versus Wade, so here in Rhode Island, notwithstanding what the U.S. Supreme Court has said, the right to abortion remains intact. The point being, what happens right here at the state and local level is really what determines how many rights you have. So don't think that it's meaningless to try to advocate at the local and state level. This is where the rubber hits the road. So going from there right into what do you do? Now this is pretty much Legislative Advocacy 101. We're going to start at the beginning. As I said, there'll be time to ask questions, but it can be a complicated process. And even things that you think you know how it works may not be actually how it works. So we're going to start with some slides on how a bill becomes a law. The first thing that happens is a bill gets introduced by a legislator, and it gets a number. Any representative or senator can introduce bills. One interesting thing that's been going on is there have been some efforts by some legislators to limit the number of bills that a legislator can introduce in any one session. Representative June Speakman also opposed it at a hearing that took place a week or two ago. And that limitation has not been put into effect in the House chamber, even though there have been efforts to do that. We believe legislators represent their constituents. If they have 20, 30, 40 interesting ideas that they think ought to be put into law, they ought to have the right to do that. So once the bill is introduced, it is referred to a committee. There are, 10 or so legislative committees on both the House side and the Senate side. The bill often gets to the committee that one would most imagine it goes to. Some of the major ones are a Finance Committee, there's a Judiciary Committee, there's a Health and Human Services Committee, Corporations Committee, and so on down the line. In the past year or two, both the House and Senate have established committees dealing with technology, artificial intelligence. So committees can change as time goes by and other issues arise that it makes sense to have a committee. So at some point, if the sponsor of the bill requests a hearing, the committee will meet and consider the bill. The consideration involves hearing testimony from the public. We'll get into the details of how that works later on, but that is the second step in the process. Once the bill has been introduced, the committee hearings are then held. Agendas are posted under the rules, generally until the end of the session when rules get suspended. The General Assembly is supposed to post the committees are supposed to post 48 hours in advance when the meeting is taking place and what particular bills they're going to hear. So at the hearing, a few things can happen. The committee has a number of options at its disposal. The first one is they can recommend that the bill be passed exactly as it was introduced. They can recommend that the bill be passed with some amendments that have been proposed. They can recommend a substitute bill be passed. That means there have been significant enough changes that a newly formed bill is proposed that has all the changes put into it. I can recommend that the bill be considered by another committee. Sometimes the committee chair thinks this really doesn't belong here. There's another committee that would make more sense to go to. They send it there. They can report the bill to the floor with no recommendations, which I think has happened maybe once in the last 15 years. And finally, and most importantly, they can recommend that the bill be postponed or held for further study. This is a term you will hear all the time at hearings. Now, it's very confusing to a lot of people, and I think to some extent the General Assembly gets unfairly maligned for for doing this. What will often happen is at a hearing where testimony is being taken, the committee will hold all the bills for further study. They are not going to vote directly on the merits of the bill. Some people see that as an attempt to bury the bill. In some instances, it is. But in almost all instances, it really is a matter of saying, we've gotten the testimony, now we need to think about it, we need to hear from people about it, and then decide what we should do with it. So any bill that is going to move forward, as great as it may be, is generally not going to be voted on at this first committee hearing. It really will be just to get testimony from the public, and you shouldn't throw up your hands and say, oh, they held it for further study, that means the bill is dead. Just about every bill that passes the General Assembly each year was initially held for further study. Assuming that the committee does then approve the bill, either in its original form or amended or substitute form, it then is put on the floor of the House and the Senate. There are a number of things that happen once it goes on the agenda. The bill will get debated on the floor. There will be an opportunity for members of the House or the Senate, depending on where the bill is, to propose floor amendments to the legislation. Those floor amendments will then be considered and voted on, either approved or rejected. And once all the amendments are taken care of one way or the other, there's then a vote on the bill as it is or as it is amended. And the majority of legislators vote to support it. It then moves on to the next step. Otherwise, the bill fails. I think it's fair to say, once the bill has gone to the floor, a decision has been made that the bill should pass. Now, it doesn't mean that the bill won't be changed on the floor. It also doesn't mean that in some instances, there's enough opposition from people on the floor that a decision is made to recommit the bill back to committee. So it's not quite always the case that once a bill goes to the floor, it means it has smooth sailing, but it is a general sign that there's interest in passing the bill. Leadership does not vote bills out of committee, generally knowing that they're going to be killed on the floor because people don't like it. And then once the bill is passed, it goes over to the other side. So if the House has passed the bill, then it goes to the Senate, and the Senate goes through the same process. They'll get the bill, they'll submit it to one of their committees, which often is the same committee that heard it on the House side, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And then the whole rinse cycle repeat goes on, and if the Senate does the same thing, passes the bill in the same form, it then goes to the governor's desk. But what's important, as this says, both chambers must pass identical versions of the bill. So if the bill goes to the House and then goes to the Senate, and the Senate says, we don't like the way this is worded, or we think it's missing an important provision, and they amend it, the Senate then sends the bill back to the House, and the House has to decide whether they agree with those amendments and therefore pass it as the Senate has passed it, in which case it then goes to the governor. Or if they disagree, then you have these wonderful fights between the House and the Senate, two different versions of a bill. Senate wants its version, the House wants its version, and WrestleMania takes place, and then who knows what happens. But the important thing is that the versions must be identical. So the fact that the two houses have each passed a bill on the same subject and they're pretty much alike doesn't quite cut it. There has to be a final decision made. This is the version we're going to pass. And then finally, it goes to, if it passes both houses in the same form, it then goes to the governor, who gets to consider the bill. And the governor has a few choices. One is to sign the bill into law. The other is to take no action. in which case the bill will become law after a set period of time. And third, the governor has the option of vetoing the bill and then returning it to the legislature, and then it's up to the legislature to decide whether they want to override the veto. An override takes more than a majority vote, and there's often a lot of discussion as to whether a veto override should take place. One of the interesting things is, because the legislature passes so many bills at the very end of the session, which is something we'll briefly talk about in a minute, the legislature is often not in session when the bills get vetoed, and it makes it a little harder for the legislature to decide to come back for a special session and override the veto. So advocacy can happen at all stages of a bill. So when a bill gets introduced, you have an opportunity to talk with the sponsor of the bill, to talk with members of the committee that the bill has been sent to. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of reaching out to your legislators on these issues. I think it's fair to say that if a legislator gets 3, 5 phone calls, emails, personal emails, I'm not talking about the cookie cutter ones that everybody signs, and so forth, but they get a personal call or email from a constituent, just a few of them, a legislator's ears perks up, and they are going to listen to you. So I don't want to in any way underemphasize the role you can play just by picking up that phone, getting on your computer, and sending an email. In a few minutes we'll talk about what that email should say, what the phone call should say, but whether it's in committee, whether it goes to the floor, whatever phase it's in, you can contact, you should contact your legislator if it's a bill, if it's an issue that you care about. Now, at this point, this is the first section, so I'd like to turn it over to Vimala and June to offer their comments about this, and then we'll take a couple of questions, if people have them, related to this topic, about how a bill becomes a law, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Thanks, Steve. And, it's so great just to see everyone here. I know it's not on very good circumstances, but just to be in community together and really, talk through this process. Deep breath, everyone. It's going to be a wild next few years. But again, just really happy to be here and see all you folks. One of the things that I think Steve hit on a lot of different pieces of this, but I would say power mapping. I know some folks have probably heard of it, but one of my favorite things is power mapping, from like trying to convince my friends to go to a certain restaurant to passing a big legislative abortion bill at the State House. I think power mapping is one of the things that is really key to understanding how you push for a bill. And that is, understand. I don't know if folks watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but there's like this meme with Charlie, and he's got all these different, the different like strings to this person, that person trying to solve a problem. And that's similar with power mapping. It's understanding who's who. It's Rhode Island. Use it to your advantage. You might know the person on the finance committee, or your brother knows someone's uncle on that, right? And so it's using that to your advantage. Rhode Island is very small, and I think that is one of the greatest gifts here, is that we're only about 1 degree away from one another. But understanding the power structures at the State House, who is on a committee, in order for a bill to become a law, you have to get that first big step is getting that hearing and then getting it past that committee. Having an understanding of where those committee members stand and on your specific issue, and so knowing what they care about, building relationships with them. I think relationship building is really important. I'm born and raised from Woonsocket, but some of these legislators have been people I've grown up with at this point, and so. Some of the things I just know, right, about people. I know the skeletons, I know where their dark secrets are. And so, and those aren't hard to build, especially in Rhode Island. I really do think folks want to connect, folks want to know each other and build community together. But understanding committee members is really important. What's going to push them to make those bills a priority? Asking your legislator, what are your top priorities this session? What are your top 5? Because I know they have a limited amount that they can pick when they bring it up, to leadership on what to push forward. And if enough legislators are like, hey, this bill here, I really like bill number 1, and 10 other legislators are saying they like that bill number 1, it's going to get some momentum at the leadership level, and they're going to be like, what is this bill? Should we be paying attention to it? And so getting that piece, I think working with other groups, working in coalition with other organizations and advocacy groups. ACLU is one of the really, really good ones with civil liberties work, but if you're interested in gun violence prevention, reproductive freedom, in economic justice, there are so many groups you can plug into. And I know Steve will know all the ways you can plug into those groups, and so already working where the work is already being done. You don't have to do this on your own. These folks have experts, they have data, they have information that will help on the issues that you care about. And we, I think it's just so much better to work in coalition with other people. And there's just a lot of folks out there who are already doing really good work. Steve mentioned this, but reaching out to your legislator. I'm a retired local official from Woonsocket. I was on the local school committee in Woonsocket. But like he said, like if I got an email that was like, I voted for you and I'm disappointed, I would feel really sad. Like I would be like, why? And try to work with that person to really explain myself. And some of these legislators, they get elected by like a couple hundred votes. It's like, they're not winning by a lot. Like it's not a lot of people voting for them. These elections are not, not a lot of folks are voting, which is really sad, but also, hold them accountable. Some people, I think this last election won by less than 100 votes, and so your phone calls count, your emails count, and those conversations count. So build strong relationships with your legislators, and that they'll get to know you. They're just regular people out there. Another one is writing op-eds and like social media, just to get your message out there as well. A lot of local papers are looking for content, right? And so your op-eds are important. People are reading those. Those can be shared, on the internet. And I think those are and then support your legislators too. Just make sure they're doing good things. Make sure you're telling them that you're thankful for them. That you're here to help to push the things you care about.
Good morning. Can't hear me? Let me know. So a couple of comments on what both of my colleagues have said. First of all, about the bill limit, thank you for giving me credit for opposing it. The House has problems processing legislation, right? There are 75 of us. We all have our agendas. Unfortunately, most of that work takes place in the last 6 weeks. We're there from January to June. So in my testimony and to the speaker, I have said we need to deal with that. Don't tell me I can only put in 15 or 18 bills. Just let's start right now in January, right? We're meeting now Tuesdays and Thursdays. All we are doing is adjourning in the memory of lost loved ones, which is an important part of our symbolic work, but we have not processed one single piece of legislation yet. And we were sworn in on the 7th. So I have urged that we somehow try to smooth out our schedule so we're not there until midnight in May and June, and there is no air conditioning in the chamber. I don't know if you know that. So that about the bill limit is one thing that I wanted to build on. The help for further study. The first time I went to the State House was to testify in favor of marriage equality, and the bill was held for further study. I had no idea what that meant, but I was crushed. And it's only when I got there that I realized that the process is what Steve says. Sometimes it is death for a bill, but it is always part of the process for every bill. So don't lose heart when your bill is held for further study. However, what you need to do is pay attention to how to get it out of committee, right? And that's where the advocacy piece comes in, and all the ways that my colleagues have talked about advocacy work, right? Stay in touch with your members, write letters to the editor, show up at the State House. About staying in touch with the members though, Most of us don't have offices. We do not have phones, so the phone number that you find on my materials is my personal cell phone. It will ring here. I will answer it. Hi, this is June. It's not my admin assistant, it's right to me. So chairs of committees have better support than their rank and file members, but just know that, as Vimala said, the touch is very intimate, if you'll pardon use that word. You can reach us very, very easily. We all have rep emails, which many of us read, although a whole bunch of stuff that's garbage comes into our rep emails too. I have a Gmail account. I ask my constituents and others to reach me on that. That's much easier for me to process. So make sure when you're talking to your representatives and your senators that you know the best way to get in contact with them. Many of us also have community meetings at libraries on Saturday mornings. Go to those. Those are notoriously underattended. So we sit there are 5 people in the audience, they all want to, I live in the East Bay, they all want to talk about the Washington Street Bridge. Okay, I want to talk about that too. We are nervous that the president is going to pull the funding, by the way, so watch that, but that's call your senators and your reps about that. So contact your reps, advocacy at all stages. Again, you too can provide legislative ideas, by the way, right? If you have a brilliant idea for how to bring peace on earth or take care of poverty or something, bring it to your rep. Maybe better is something less what do you call it? Universal. But the bill that we're going to talk about in a minute, the student computer privacy bill, that didn't come out of my head, that came out of Stu's head. And so he brought that legislative idea to me. You can do that too. Don't hesitate to do that. I have a bill right now that came to me from one of my constituents about changing the flow of traffic on the bike path. I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea. I don't use the bike path, but he gave me a good reason for putting it in, so I put it in and it will be heard. So you can do that too. Don't hesitate to do that. A preliminary meeting with your rep or your senator to talk it out might be a good idea, because not all constituents have fully baked ideas when they bring them to us. So it's a good idea if your rep or your senator knows what you're asking for. I would also, when Steve said you should focus on state and local government, don't forget your school committees. I know we're not here to talk about local government, but you know, ACLU can resist bans on books in libraries, changes in curriculum for teachers that aren't based on fact or science. So pay close attention to your school committees. And as you said, that when you're there, that matters. If 20 folks show up to resist a book ban, that makes a lot of difference, and it helps your school committee members to have the courage to do what they need to do. More?
Thank you, Joe. We have time for just a couple questions. Anybody has them specifically on how a bill becomes a law? Otherwise, we'll move forward. Right in front.
When a bill is postponed and held for further study, it says postponed indefinitely. Does that mean that there is no time limit, that it can just be postponed until kingdom come?
Yes, yes. And it dies at the end of session. If it's not taken up by the end of session, it's dead. Yeah, so that's right. It doesn't have to come back up in 20 days or something like that. That's correct.
Who's on these committees and how do you get on a committee? What do they consist of?
Do you want
So I don't know how the Senate works, but in the House, we are asked before session starts, after the election in November and before we reconvene in January, we are asked to submit a list of our preferred committees. The Speaker makes those decisions. And there are the above-the-line committees, they call them, which are Finance and Judiciary, and then the below-the-line ones, all of which I sit on, although I sit on Health and Human Services, Environment and Natural Resources, and Municipal Government and Housing, and I love them, and Oversight, and I love those committees. Finance is a real bear. They have hundreds of meetings. Judiciary has the gun nights, which are overwhelming. But many members want to serve on those committees because they're high profile and they have lots of bills to process, but it's completely up to the Speaker.
Just one more question in this. We'll do somebody way in the back. No? Yep. Yep.
As someone who has been up there and testified, I have a question about the process and how it can be changed. So as most people know, there's a lot of power in the Rhode Island president, the Senate, as well as the Speaker of the House, much more than any state. and that's bothersome to me, because if they don't want things to go to the floor, they don't go to the floor. Secondly, on the testifying, I've testified, and I found the process to be very humiliating, because they allow the members on the committee to say whatever they want, for as long as they want, and the member of the public who is speaking is limited to very little time and cannot respond to the person on the committee. Is there anything being done by either ACLU or anything to change those processes, which really are suppressing citizen engagement?
No. I don't want to minimize that, but we're actually going to talk about that in a few minutes. There are some real deficits in the way the process works. I don't want to give any sort of rosy view about this, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. With that, let's move on to the next part, and that sort of ties in with that last thing. Some tips for testifying. And I know our panelists will probably have some other ideas that we'll build on them. One that we suggest is provide written testimony. It is great to come before the committee and testify, although there are some downsides, as you were hearing from that last question. But I think it's important for a few reasons. One is that not all the committee members will be at the hearing. It will be nice to have a written record that they can then turn to. One of the great things that has happened in the House, and has not happened in the Senate yet, is that committee testimony, written committee testimony is posted on the General Assembly's website. And we'll show you how to get to it later on in the presentation. And we use that all the time. It's great to see what people are saying. If you support a bill, it's great to be able to see the written testimony of people who oppose it and learn the reasons why they oppose it. So you have the opportunity to challenge the reasons that are being given for opposing a bill that you support. And so I think that putting your thoughts in writing, submitting them to the committee, is a really helpful way of letting your testimony live on beyond the 2 short minutes that you may be given to testify. Especially if it's a complicated issue, you're able to get your thoughts down in a way that you might not be able to at the committee hearing itself. Next, practice your elevator pitch. As you heard, there often is a limit on the time that you have to testify before the committee. Some committees will give you 2 minutes, some will give you 5. It may often depend on how long the agenda is, how many people are scheduled to have signed up to testify. You can be pretty much assured that there's going to be a hearing on an abortion bill. They're not interested in having everybody speak for 10 minutes, and I can appreciate that. So there will be limits, so it really makes a lot of sense for you to think ahead of time, what are the most important points you want to make to the committee? It really helps if you hone your pitch to bullet points that they hear, that they won't tune out by listening to a lot of people. All right, save for the intermission. It's helpful for you to think ahead of time. So you're there when your name is called. You know exactly what the message is that you want to give to the committee. Next, don't repeat what others have said. This is something that not just the legislators, but some of us lobbyists who spend a lot of time up there also strongly support. They don't need to hear 10 people say the exact same thing. And it's fine for you to say, I agree with what so-and-so said. They encapsulated my comments perfectly. That's fine. There's no need for you to repeat it. It really just ends up annoying the legislators, and it's a reason that they, set 2-minute limits on people speaking. Keep it local. This is really important, I think. That is, keep it local also means keep it personal. If the bill in some way directly affects you, your family, your neighborhood, they love to hear those stories. You know, the ACLU comes and we have all these wonderful abstract principles, ideas about civil rights and civil liberties, and violating this amendment or that amendment. And that sometimes can only go so far. But what can really move legislators is stories showing how a bill will directly affect them in some way. And to the extent that a bill does that, to the extent that you can tie it back to what's going on in your community, these things resonate a lot more than just, you know, general concerns or general support for a bill. So to the extent that it really has a personal impact, make that personal impact known to them. It will have an effect. Sign up before hearings. So just in terms of a process, what happens is that committees will usually have sign-up sheets, either inside the committee room where it's being heard or on a table right outside the committee room. There will often be a sheet for each particular bill that's being heard that day in the committee, and you'll be asked to sign up, probably indicate your position on the bill, and the sheets are then collected when the meeting starts. And depending on the chair, depending on the agenda, they may or may not go in order. Just so you know, that will go into one of the annoyances we'll talk about in a little bit. But you do want to sign up before the hearing. I mean, some committee chairs are very open, and if you get there late, you can go to the clerk and ask the clerk if they'll let the chair know that you want to speak. But it's really best, and it's more convenient, efficient, if you sign up before the hearing starts.
Question?
Hold on. And then you go in. You know, it's nice to just thank the chair, introduce yourself. You want to let them know who you are and why you're there. That's the first thing you should do. Don't forget to do that. They like to know who you are and why you're there. Remain calm and professional. So, you know, a lot of times you'll be speaking, you'll be testifying on what is a very controversial issue. And as I said before, you know, you may be coming to the committee hearing because it personally affects you in some very deep way. And it's easy for you to hear other people testifying on the other side of the bill and getting you all riled up. But I think it is always in your best interest to remain as calm as you can. Don't get argumentative. Don't yell. Let them know, let the committee know that you're in charge of yourself, and you know how to present your viewpoint without screaming or gesticulating. Hey, speak plainly. So you may be somebody with expertise on an issue, and many of the committee members may have no idea of some of the things you're talking about. There are a lot of technical bills that get heard in committees, and often it's the individuals testifying who know more about it than anybody on the committee itself. So what you want to think about if you're dealing with an issue like that is, you know, try to dumb it down a bit so that people who may not generally understand the issue can understand it from what you're saying. You know, committees hold hearings on hundreds of bills covering a wide array of topics. Nobody on the committees is an expert on all those things. So to the extent that you're able to provide expertise, it's really helpful, but provide it in a way that they will understand. Another very important thing, if you don't know the answer, say you don't know the answer. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Every session, I can't tell you how many times my response to a question is, I don't know, but I will be glad to try to get the answer for you. That is the response. You don't want to make up an answer. You don't want to say you think you know something when you don't. It's perfectly fine, as I said, to say, that's a great question, Representative. I'm going to find out, and I'll get back to you and let you know. And last, take a deep breath. Actually, what I sometimes say is hold your nose, but one or the other, whichever one is more appropriate. You know, just prepare yourself, especially if you haven't done it before. It can be a bit nerve-wracking the first time that you testify. I would say the second time, you're over it. So get it over with. It's okay to be nervous. Try to prepare as best as you can. If it's your first time and you are nervous, go give your testimony to a friend, get through it, feel comfortable with it, and it'll make it a lot better. For the most part, legislators are not there to try to intimidate you when you come there for the first time. They'll try to be sensitive to that, but do what you can to make yourself comfortable, especially that first time. So those are the 10 tips. We'll get to lobbying annoyances in just a minute. Let me have Vimala and Representative Speakman see if they want to offer any additional tips, and then we'll get to one of my favorite parts about all the bad things that I have to mention.
I don't have too much to add. I think the 10 tips are really good. I would just add just more technical stuff like understanding if you haven't been to the State House, the parking situation, just being able to be prepared for that. And then another thing is the hearing times range from like 4 o'clock to sometimes midnight, sometimes they're over quickly. But just to prepare yourself for those long nights, so bringing a snack, being prepared to make some other friends that are going to be there just as long as you are. Practicing is timing yourself to see how long your testimony actually takes. Sometimes I would find myself, like Steve said, if folks are repeating, I'm just crossing out things at that point because folks have already said it. And if you don't have snacks, there are vending machines in the basement and a So it's in the basement, and this has been a new discovery, and I'm not a gatekeeper, so I'm sharing this all with you. And there's also a bubbler down there too, so if you want to refill your drinks or water. But those are just technical things, because sometimes like gun nights, abortion nights, you're there for a really long time waiting to testify, which makes it really hard for just average folks to just go up there and do the thing. But yeah, just be prepared for don't be shocked when you're there for a long time.
You'll have to show me where the water I got. So all great tips, the 10 are great, and what I had are also wonderful. I would, to the point about the timing, there will be expert witnesses, and they often get as much time as they need when we're testifying, when we're hearing on technical bill. And these hearings have two purposes, right? One is to help the committee members learn about the bill and shape their decision process. And the other is public participation so that you all can weigh in on the bill. And trying to do those two things in the same meeting is a lot, right? So you may have someone from the Department of Health or something, the AG's office, testifying for 45 minutes at the start of the hearing. And then you all come at 10 o'clock at night and we're like, 2 minutes, okay. And some chairs have like bells and alarms that go off, or they have the clerk saying time's up. So I appreciate in the back what you said last time about how frustrating that can be when you've waited for 4 hours. And we don't break, right? The hearings start and they stay until they're done. And usually, the chair gets to everyone on the list. So if you signed up and you stay, you will be heard. But it might be at midnight. And to me, that's not a good decision process for any of us, nor is it good for our health and safety driving home. But that is the way the system works. Some of us have wondered if we could maybe adjourn a hearing and start it up again the next night. That was rejected as a change in the rules, in part because you all come up to the State House and we don't want to drag you back the next night. So it's really a tricky process to navigate. And know that in terms of member behavior in the committees, some members have to be at 2 hearings at once. Sometimes the speaker wants to meet with us during a committee hearing, so we're coming and going all the time. Also know that many of us have worked at the jobs that pay our mortgage all day, and then we come to the State House at 4. And I'm not whining, I'm just saying this is how our work life goes. And we have floor sessions, which can go 1, 2, 3 hours, depending on the agenda, and then we go to committee. That's called at the rise. I don't understand why it's at the rise when it's at the end of, but that's one of those things. So if you see people looking tired, they may in fact be tired because of the nature of our work. We're a part-time legislature, as you know. It really feels like a full-time job most of the time. So I think that's probably all I have. So we can get into questions.
Before we get to questions, I just do, since Representative Speakman sort of started hitting on some of these things, some lobbying annoyances, emphasis on some. So,
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
As Representative Speakman said, very little occurs at the beginning of the session. It is a source of frustration for many people. So then what you end up with is this backlog, and often very lengthy agendas that committees have. 20 bills, 25 bills. Some of them may be simple bills, some may be very complex. Some may have no people signed up to testify, some may have 20, 30 people signed up to testify. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. I hear every once in a while of other state legislators where they set specific times when you can expect to speak. And I say, wow, what a great idea. But as Representative Speakman said, it can be that you'll be there for a very long time and have no idea exactly when you're going to be asked to speak. And that leads to the second one, meeting at the rise, which is a very strange term, but so be it. The problem is, meeting at the rise means the committee is going to meet once the floor session is done. Once all the members have gone on the House or Senate chamber floor, they've done their business in terms of resolutions that Representative Speakman talked about. If there's an agenda of bills that have come out of committee to be voted on the floor, they're going to do all those bills. And so you have no specific idea when the committee meeting is actually going to start. So it can be, the session start at 4 o'clock, as you heard. That often means they start at 4:15 or 4:30, which is something else. And then you just wait. You don't know exactly when often the committee is going to meet if the hearing is taking place at the rise. So it can be an extremely frustrating thing. That's why, as Vimala said, bring your snacks, bring your drinks. It could be a while. Duplicate bills and no joint committees. So this is again something different from a lot of other state legislatures. The House has a bill, the Senate has a bill. Very strange thing, people say, the House passes a bill, the Senate has its own bill, passes the identical version. They say, okay, well now it goes to the governor, right? It becomes law, and that's not what happens. As I mentioned at the beginning, the House bill has to go over to the Senate has to pass the House bill, the House has to pass the Senate bill, otherwise it's not going to the governor. And that happens when there are these differences of opinion on exactly how a bill should read. They could be very minor differences. Again, in a lot of legislators, you have joint committees that sort of get together or joint hearings where the two sides sort of duke it out and they come to a conclusion and then both sides vote on it, and that's not what happens here in Rhode Island. Each House does its own thing, the Senate does its own thing, and then there's this informal back and forth that takes place on who yells uncle first, who decides which version of the bill gets passed. And then last, but certainly not least, deadlines. There really are no deadlines in the legislature. There are supposed deadlines for when bills should be introduced. And that deadline is routinely ignored. There are deadlines for when committees are supposed to consider and pass out bills, and they all end up being suggestions, especially at the end of the session when so much happens. So it is a messy process. It's one that is not geared to be consumer-friendly, constituent-friendly, but it is what it is. I mean, there are legislators like Rep. Speakman who try behind the scenes to try to get some movement and change in the way the process works. But it's important that you at least understand it's not by any means a perfect system. You're going to have to deal with some very frustrating aspects of how the process works. So the next section is going to be navigating the General Assembly website, which is really critical for you if you want to follow what's going on. But again, we'll take a couple of questions.
Or can anyone be there, like a citizen, can they, on the floor, during debate, propose an amendment or introduce a debate, or are they just observers at that point?
Yeah, the debates take place on the House floor. Everything that occurs on the House floor is among the representatives. There's a gallery where you can watch what's going on. You can certainly talk with your representative before a vote if you're interested in an amendment, and ask them if they're going to be supporting or opposing an amendment, they would put in an amendment. You can do all those things, but the debate itself is among the legislators. Many legislators welcome that. Seeing their constituents come to them and talk to them there. It's certainly something that it's appropriate for you to do. But I will say there are some legislators who you will have a very hard time finding on the floor before the session starts.
Yeah, and I would say to that, if timing is important, so it's great to hear from you on the floor before the bill's being heard in committee, for example, or before there's a vote on the floor, although the cake is pretty baked by that time. We can talk more about that later. AARP has a cadre of volunteer lobbyists, and we know they're coming because usually they've left a handout on our desk, and then they're in their red shirts, so you can tell when the AARP is in the house because they're very visible, and that really matters. And one thing, and I know you're going to get to this, one thing the AARP does is give me a flyer that says 57% of the people who live in your district are AARP members, and 87% of those people vote. It's like, okay, I'm listening. So, there are things you can do to sort of enhance your voice, even in those few minutes you grab on the floor.
I've seen that, I'm new to Rhode Island, but I've seen that there are certain kinds of bills that seem to be coming up every year about gun laws, about death with dignity. And my question is, if you want to speak in favor of one of those bills, should you be researching what's changed? Because obviously it's coming up year after year. There's got to be something new about it, or they wouldn't be able to bring it up again, right? So, or should you be speaking about the bill in general?
Well, I think that if you have new things to say, you absolutely should say. Things have changed between the time a bill was heard in 2024 and when it's being heard in 2025. Absolutely, make legislators aware. Now I have even more reasons why you should support this bill, because this happened. So absolutely, and it's your question leads to a point, which is some bills take a very, very long time to get passed. Marriage equality, which was mentioned, took years and years and years. The codification of Roe versus Wade.
Yeah. The Death with Dignity bill has, I think Representative has put it in for 9, 10, 11 years. The content hasn't changed. The politics may change, which may make us more likely to pass it. But I believe the content is the same, and there's nothing to prevent us from putting in the same bill over and over again. So, as we will talk about with our computer privacy bill, right?
And sometimes the bill version does change over the years because of changes, and because of comments that have come from committee hearings. People have raised valid points about the way a bill is worded, for example, and so the next year the bill has been tweaked a bit. I want to give you some tips on what you can find there, and I do want to say it is, Rhode Island's General Assembly website is really pretty great. They have a lot of information there. They have a lot of different ways to find the information, and if you're interested in following bills, following what's going on, it really is a great place to spend a little time when you're not watching your TikTok videos. So this, what you're seeing now, this is the home page of the General Assembly, and it is very useful. If you look at the top stripe, home, House, Senate, bills and laws, news, and watch. So we'll be getting to each of these in a minute, but the House takes you to photographs and bios, information about each of the members of the House of Representatives. The Senate link does the same for the senators. Bills and laws, we're going to talk about that in a minute. That is a key link to find a whole ton of information. News gives you news releases from legislators in the General Assembly about bills they've introduced or a bill has passed. And then watch, which we'll also get into, really important. You are able to both watch committee hearings live stream as they're going on. If you aren't able to go to the State House and you aren't able or don't want to testify in person, you can watch the committee hearing as it goes on. And those committee hearings are also recorded you can go to the watch page and watch previous hearings. Again, we'll get to that in a little bit. And then there's some other things on the side which we'll go back to. So this is the bills and laws. This is where the bills and laws link takes you. And I can't tell you how much time each session I spend on this page. There's that list going down about bill status history, bill text, committee agendas. Hit any one of them and you're going to find a lot of information. On the very far left, you can find all that information about previous years. So if there's a bill that you know passed last year, or if you think there's a difference between the bill as it was introduced this year and how it was introduced in the past, you're able to go back more than 10 years and look at copies of bills, of journals, laws that passed. Really, really helpful. And then the red lined section is all the current stuff that's going on. Again, you just go down the list. You can find the bill, the status of a bill, the text of a bill, agendas of committees as they're meeting, on and on and on and on. So we're just going to go through a few of them in the next few minutes, but I really would encourage any of you who are following more than one bill or want to know what's going on, you go to this page and you'll find a lot of information. The top one that talks about bill status history, if you click that link, this is where it will take you. And this is a way for you to find the bill you're interested in. And you can do it in a whole array of different methods. So let's see, the next slide. All right, so here we go. This is a bill I'm going to be talking about, Bill S-63. It's an immigration bill. And so if I know that there's a bill that's sponsored by Senator Jonathan Acosta, but I don't know the bill number, I want to find what the text of the bill is, you can do it a whole number of ways. You can do it by, if you know what committee it's in, on the category, you can put in Judiciary Committee, and that will give you a list of all the bills pending in Judiciary Committee. You happen to know that Senator Acosta is the sponsor of the bill. All you need to do is put in his name, and you'll get a list of all the bills that he's signed on to. If you click the box that says prime sponsor, you'll only get a list of the bills that he is the primary sponsor of. If you know the bill number, you put that in, and the bill number will come up. As we'll see in the next slide. So if you hit anyone, and you don't need to put all those things in, you just need to put one of those things in order to try to find the bill. So this is Senate Bill 63. You'll see right under the number of the bill, it lists all the people who are signed on as co-sponsors. So Senator Acosta is the initial sponsor. He's gotten these other individuals to sign on. Both the House and the Senate limit the number of people who show up publicly to 10, the first 10 people who signed on to a bill. So the fact that there are 10 doesn't mean that there are only 10 people who are supporting the bill. By the same token, if there's only one person who signed it, doesn't necessarily mean that nobody else supports it. It means the sponsor, for whatever reason, decided not to try and get other people to sign on to the bill. So underneath that, you'll see the title of the bill and a very brief explanation of what the bill does. Very, very brief, especially in a bill like this. And then underneath that, you'll see the status. So the bill will, on January 23rd, the bill was introduced and it was referred to Senate Judiciary Committee. When the bill is scheduled for hearing, that will show up on this page. It will tell you, January 30th, bill scheduled for hearing, and so on down the line with whatever goes on. So here's a copy of the bill, and I wanted to show you a bill because to help you understand how to read a bill, which is not necessarily totally intuitive. So in this particular instance, this bill is amending a law that's already in place. And you can see what the amendments are by strikeouts and by underline in color. They even put it in color for you. So the strikeouts are in red, the underlines are in blue. That means what the red strikeouts means that language in the current law is being proposed to be removed. And the language that's highlighted in blue and underlined, that is new language that's being proposed to add to the bill. So sometimes you will see a bill that's all blue underlined, which means it's a totally new law. There's nothing in the General Assembly laws right now that deals with it. It's all new language. Occasionally you see a bill that just has all red strikeout, which means somebody doesn't like the law that's on the books, they want to get rid of it. Most bills are like this, where you're tweaking something and making some changes to a bill to address a particular issue, which this bill does. So it's useful to know exactly what you're looking at when you're reading a bill. This is a committee calendar from many years ago. If we did a committee calendar now, you'd see a blank page because, as Representative Speakman has pointed out, no committees are meeting. So when committees do get going, this was from February 20th, when you hit the committee calendar sheet, this will tell you every committee that is meeting, and it will tell you the committee itself, what time it's meeting. There you see that awful rise of the House that we talked about, which is when most of the committees meet. Revised means that the agenda has been revised since it was first posted, so if you're following that particular committee meeting, you want to check the agenda again, see how it's been changed. The view allows you to actually see the agenda. It will pop up. You can see all the bills that are being considered by the committee. And then finally, it will tell you the place, which room in the State House the committee hearing is being heard. So as you can see, this, when things get going, a lot of committees can be meeting at the same time. And Representative Speakman spoke about how sometimes committee members have to go back and forth because there are actually two committees that they're on that are meeting at the same time. It also means for an organization like the ACLU, there may be 2 or 3 committees hearing bills relating to civil liberties at a time. And Madeline and I get our exercise going up and down the stairs, trying to catch hearings on bills on a bunch of committees taking place at the same time. But again, the point is how really useful and efficient it is to go to the website and be able to get a lot of useful information. Normally, 48-hour committee meetings are posted at least 48 hours in advance. That changes at the end of the session, but at least at the beginning, you will often have advance notice. One very good thing that's happened in the House in the last few years is rather than just do the 48-hour requirement, there have been Friday evening committee dumps. What they do is they generally post all the committee hearings for the next week on Friday, and that's been a real help to us because usually it was just 48 hours, so you have to keep on on Monday, you find committee hearings for Wednesday, you have to wait until Tuesday to find out what committees we're hearing on Thursday. So I hope the House keeps that up because it's been really helpful. Watch, so this is what I mentioned before. If you hit watch, this will take you to a page where you can watch a whole bunch of things. You can watch things that are going on as they occur. There's a schedule of things going on in different channels. The live, if committees were meeting on the schedule, you'd see, for example, House Judiciary Committee number 1. Which means that the committee hearing would be, you'd be able to watch the committee hearing as it took place on Live 1, just by clicking on the screen there. If you go beneath the live feeds, and we don't have a slide for that, but if you go beneath that, you'll see a listing of all the committees. It'll say House Finance Committee, House Judiciary Committee, and there will be a box for every committee hearing that has been recorded. And you can hit that box, and you'll be able to watch the hearing as it took place in all its glory. So you really do have a lot of opportunities to catch up on things. If there was a hearing you really wanted to be at or watch, but you couldn't, you can find it living in history down at the bottom of this page. you're looking at House Committee documents. This is something I mentioned before. This is just fantastic. At the home page, you hit that, and you'll see the names of committees. If you, again, you won't be able to see anything because there haven't been any committee meetings, but if you hit one of the committees, you will again get a list of all the dates that the committee has met. You hit the link for that, and you will see this list of all the written testimony that they have for that hearing, broken down by bill number. So if there's a particular bill that was heard on January 30th in Judiciary Committee, you hit Judiciary, you then hit January 30th, and you'll be able to see all the testimony that was submitted for the bills heard that day. And as I said, it's something we use regularly. We hope that someday the Senate will do the same thing, but it's been a really positive development for transparency in posting all this testimony. Daily introductions. So this is just randomly taking one of these things that's listed there. If you hit daily introductions, you will be able to see every bill that's been introduced each particular day. And it will be just like that one that I showed you with Senator Acosta's bill. It will include who the sponsors were, what the bill is about, what committee it was introduced to. And that just keeps on accumulating every day. There'll be another line added so you can check what bills were introduced in any particular day. Here are the start of bills that were introduced on January 22nd. And pick any day, and you'll get to see a feel of what's that. How to track bills. So if this is really helpful if there are only a few bills you want to track, and you're tracking hundreds of them. This isn't necessarily very helpful, but you can track particular bills and be notified by you sign up and create an account. And then you can list bills that you're interested in following, and gives you instructions on how to do that. Manage your bills, and once you put the bills in, you can both search them and also get notifications when there's a change in the status of the bill. A hearing is being heard, or it's gone to the floor, or whatever. Any questions about the General Assembly website in particular?
With all the technology that we have right now, right, we're able to watch everything. Has there been any discussion at all of offering in the future testimony via a Zoom link, so people could actually do it from home?
So we did that during COVID. It is very difficult to manage because you had to have a clerk to take in. People would call in, and then the clerk would take their phone number and then call them back when it was their turn. It was very awkward. So I don't anticipate that coming back. And also when you're dealing with people calling in from multiple different parts of the state, or even from out of state, right? People are free to testify even if they're not around. It was very wonky. It was essential. We had to do it, but I don't anticipate that coming back. In my dreams, though, we would have a way, as Steve said, to let you know, if Outback can do it, they can let you know when your reservation is ready by giving you a buzzer. There ought to be a way to let you know, we anticipate in 15 minutes you can come back to the State House and testify. I'd like us to be able to sign up electronically, right, instead of on those pieces of paper. Handwriting's not a thing that people are often good at, so the clerk's trying to figure out what your name is. Just watch the hearings, you'll see how difficult that is. But so far, we use paper sign-up sheets and in-person testimony.
Unless you're using it as a talking stick or a pointer, I don't think you need the mic. Because we can hear her buying attention in that one.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you talked earlier about the importance of building coalition for voting organizations. Is there any way you can track organizations that are lobbying on a specific bill for that purpose, or for the contrary, and identify organizations against the organization?
Yes and no. You can repeat the question? Oh, good. The question was, is there any way to track, so other organizations work on bills? Is there a way to track what bills organizations are working on, so you know that they're involved? The yes and no means, first you can check the testimony that's been submitted. That is something we do. That's one of the reasons we look at it, to see what organizations are providing testimony. There's also if you're a paid lobbyist, you have to register as a lobbyist and indicate either what topics you're lobbying on or particular bill numbers that you're lobbying on. So if you go to, that's on the Secretary of State, that's on the Secretary of State's website, right? On the Secretary of State's website, you can find what organizations have said that they are lobbying on. But it's not necessarily the case that you will find out the particular bills other than by looking at testimony. So for example, when we register by categories. There are just too many bills we lobby on, including bills that we don't expect to lobby on, and then suddenly we realize there's an issue with it. So we just have general topics, so it won't provide you the specifics necessarily of a bill, other than looking at whether we submit written testimony on the legislation.
Groups have like their top 5 bills that they'll let the public know about. Like Steve said, we used to track like 50 to 100 bills a year, but there will be like those top 5 that we're really pushing, and if, it's kind of tough, because if you're on their email list or if you're involved with them, you might get that list, but it is a little bit, it's not just like on one website where you can find what all the advocacy groups are lobbying on.
But it is a good point, though, that if there's a particular organization you're interested in, if you go to their website, you will probably find their bill. And we put up a lot of our testimony on our website, and by the end of the session, there are probably about 100 pieces of testimony there that you can find. So that is another way to find out what people are doing. All right, so all right, one more question.
Hi, sorry. So the main problem that I'm having is I want to take action, but I work 9 to 5, so I have like a limited time to actually do something. So I have like skills like graphic design, writing. I can text somebody, but is there like there's an app called Asana where you can post like action items, and people will just go in and be like, I'm on it, take that action item and do it. Is there anything like that in this organization that can like utilize people's skills effectively? I don't know. I want to be helpful. I don't know how.
That's a lot above my head. But yes, there's certainly particular ways. If there are particular things you think you can do to help an organization, let them know what they are. There are both things to help the organization and all the things we're talking about directly lobbying legislators. But if you have particular skills that you think an organization can help with, yeah, let the organization know, and we'll try to figure it out. There will be time for questions at the end, but we just want to get through everything. So please hold those thoughts, and hopefully we'll be able to get them. So next, this will go very quickly. Who are my legislators? As mentioned earlier, there's that House and Senate button at the top of the home page, and it will take you to the one will take you to the House, one will take you to the Senate. There are leaders in the House, and if you go down, you just keep on finding names. If you click on any particular legislator, you'll get to a biography of them. It will include what committees they're on and a whole bunch of other information. And then at the bottom, there are again some more links about seating chart, so you can see where they sit in the chamber. If you want to go look for them before the session starts, you can find out where their desk is, the committee members, so on and so on and so forth. Again, just another example of a lot of information you can find just by clicking on some of those buttons on the home page of the General Assembly's website. If you don't know who your legislator is and you want to find out, actually the simplest thing to do would be just to call your Board of Canvassers. They'll tell you, but you can also go on the Secretary of State's website, and there are a few ways to find your elected officials. You go there, you put in your contact information, your address, and voila, you'll get a page that lists all your different legislators, U.S. Senator, Representative, Attorney General, etc., and then it tells you your district, congressional, state, representative, senate, etc. You can find your local officials by hitting that button, and it will take you to another page on the Secretary of State's website with a list of cities and towns, and you hit the city and town, and that will get you to information about who your city and town council members are, school committee members, and so on. One final resource is meetings of public bodies. As you know, as Representative Speakman said, this is largely focused on legislative lobbying. All the tips are pretty much the same for doing it at the school committee level, your city or town council. On this Open Government Center, you can click on the Open Government Center, and it will take you to a page where you can find and attend public meetings. You hit that, and you write in, you type in the name of the committee, you know, Warren Town Council, and it will then give you a list of upcoming meetings for that public body. It will also take you to the agenda if it's been posted of that public body. And so that's for any public body that is subject to our state's open meetings law, which is really just about any public body, whether it's city or town council, a school committee, some advisory committee that the town council has set up. You'll be able to see when they're meeting and what their agenda is. So now we're getting to some of the substance after all this process. I'm going to ask Vimala to just talk briefly about a particular campaign, how it worked, how it ties into what we've been talking about, and the issue that she chose was a very important bill that passed last year. 2 years ago? What, 2 years ago? Time flies when you're having fun. The equality. The Equality and Abortion Coverage Act. So I'll turn it over to Vimala.
Yeah. So do I need a microphone, or are folks?
No.
I have about 5 minutes to go through this. So the Equality and Abortion Coverage Act, the EACA, was a big bill that Planned Parenthood worked on for many years, Steve. Wasn't it like decades that had been introduced? And so this was coming off of 2023 was coming, just the EACA expands abortion access in Rhode Island by adding abortion coverage to our state's Medicaid program and eliminating bans on abortion coverage for state employees and their dependents. And just some key kind of points on this was, it was 2023, Roe had just been overturned, midterms were showing that folks were really concerned about the abortion issue, and so I think the timing made it really a kind of a good timing on this issue. 2/3 of Rhode Islanders, when we did polling, supported the EACA, which was a big motivator for legislators. Again, they were like, what about my district though? We didn't have it broken down at that level, but we use an inside-outside strategy. So on the outside, we are one of the chairs or one of the leaders of the Rhode Island Coalition for Reproductive Freedom. ACLU is part of that coalition, along with 30 other organizations in Rhode Island, cross-movement, cross-issue areas. There was a key bill sponsor, Whip Katie Kazarian was, so she's third in leadership on the House side, and she was the sponsor on this bill, made it her priority bill, and pushed it really hard. So that's the kind of the inside piece of it. We had a lot of public testimony when we talk about abortion nights. And those legislators are counting the numbers of the pros and the cons. They're looking at the piles of the testimonies, and so that's really important. We also did a lot of lobbying at the State House every day. Planned Parenthood has some of the resources to be there every day. And then got a lot of our members and our supporters to come to lobby days, which are just like groups of folks. It could be 1 or 2 people together lobbying lobbying their legislators or lobbying some target legislators that we wanted to get to. And I can quickly go over the timeline. So that's a nice photo of the final piece of this, which took a long time to get to, and I'm quickly going to go over it without getting into too much of the nasty stuff that often happens as we're trying to pass these bills. So January to March, the bill's introduced early January. That takes, it's a process because every bill has to be reintroduced each session, and so that has to go through Leg Council. We have our own lawyers at Planned Parenthood that wanted to go through it to make sure everything was right. It was included in the governor's budget, which was a big deal to have that there, and he made it a priority, so we knew if it gets to his table, he's not going to veto it, he's going to be a supporter of that. So that was a big moment as well in the state of state, included in the budget. And then from there we had leadership meetings, so we would meet with House leadership, so that's the Speaker, the Majority Leader, the Whip, on the House side, the Senate side, and a lot of advocacy groups get like 1 or 2 of these meetings each session. Usually we would like to do it before the session starts just to make sure this is on their radar. And that's again some of that inside work that we were doing. And then from March to May there were the hearings. The big abortion nights, I think we were there for a really long time on the House side. I don't remember the Senate side being as long as the House side, but it's one of those scenes where they have like the ropes for folks getting in line to testify. And so the hearings happened in the spring. We would hand out fact sheets to legislators when we did the lobbying days, just with data, like the polling data, any information on the bill, any questions they had, we would just be there consistently, whether it's just me or volunteers with me, just to make sure first that our endorsed candidates were on board, and so those were the easy ones, and then there would be like the Judiciary Committee members, and the Senate was a little, we didn't know what would happen in the Senate committee, but that passed eventually. And then organizing, just so getting folks, like we would have monthly meetings with our members just to keep them updated on what's happening if they couldn't make it to the State House or they just wanted to know what was going on. We would have virtual spaces, sometimes in-person spaces, where folks would just get updates from us and our team on what's happening at the State House. They could ask us any questions that they wanted. And then those would be moments to also organize like testimony writing workshops, tips and tricks of providing oral or in-person testimony. And then the governor passed it. It passed in both chambers. The governor signed it right on that night. That's the picture you see here. I'm off to the faded side. Everyone wanted to be part of this picture, and so I don't even know if you didn't make it. But it was really cool because it happened so quickly. Usually it takes some time between when both chambers pass it for the governor to sign it, but that night they were like, let's just go, let's do it tonight, and that's what happened that night. Another thing I will mention about Planned Parenthood is that we do have an electoral program that helps with this work. We do endorsements, we do go to fundraisers through our PAC work, and so we're able to, I think just this last election, we have over 50% of the House are endorsed Planned Parenthood candidates, and over 50% in the Senate are Planned Parenthood endorsed candidates. So this took a lot of time. This has been decades in the making because I remember when I was first going up to the State House, maybe like over 10 years ago, the environment was much different, and Planned Parenthood has built out its political program in a way that we are able to rely on legislators and work with them to pass really big and important bills. And that's how it happened. But there was a lot of work and a lot of folks, a lot of community organizations, a lot of individuals that made this happen. It wasn't as easy as it looks, but but there was momentum, and there were a lot of people who cared about this issue. And again, I think the timing was a key factor too. You see, you were there from like the beginning, so.
And if I could say something about the relationship between organizations like Planned Parenthood and individual reps, Vimala mentioned the endorsement process. That's really important to us. We have to fill out a questionnaire, have an interview. The organization decides whether or not we share their values sufficiently to get the endorsement. They have some kind of internal process. And then we get a logo, usually, from these groups that we post on our campaign website. So if you want a shortcut to where your rep or senator stands on any issues, you can go to often to their website and see these stickers or logos. It's very helpful. And then they provide support to us on the campaign trail for canvases and other things like that. We attend their events. We help them sort of increase their profile. So it's a really good. I know lobbyists and interest groups sort of get a bad rap, but when you're with the good ones, it's a joy to work with some of these groups.
All right, thank you both, and thank you especially Vimala for your work on this really critical bill. Now we're going to just very quickly go over some sampling of proactive legislation, just so we get an idea of some of the things the ACLU will be working on this coming session. Just so you know, last year we testified on over 300 bills, so like I said, a sampling, it truly is just a sampling. The first one we're going to discuss is the bill that Representative Speakman, oh no, I'm sorry, it's not. It's going to be a bill that is a priority for us this year, particularly in light of what's going on in Washington, D.C. and the attack on immigrants across the country. This is a very technical bill, but one that has extraordinarily important impact in the immigrant community. We call it the 364-day bill, and I'll try to explain it as well as I can. But I just want you to know how important it is, and hope that you will join us in the legislature to support it. So what happens is right now there's a federal law that says that an immigrant, including it can be lawful permanent residents, an immigrant commits certain types of crimes that carry a sentence of 1 year or more, they are subject to automatic deportation. The problem is with that 1 year or more. Here in Rhode Island, as in most other states, there's a difference between a misdemeanor, minor offenses, and major offenses, which are called felonies. Under Rhode Island law, the penalties are this. For a misdemeanor, the penalty is up to 1 year. For felony, it's more than 1 year. And it's that 1 year that's the problem, because it means that these misdemeanors, because they carry a potential sentence of up to 1 year, which is 1 year or more under the federal law, people who commit minor offenses are subject to automatic deportation for committing minor crimes. They don't have to be sentenced to a year. It just has to be a crime that carries up to a year, and that is every misdemeanor in Rhode Island. What about a dozen states have done is they've changed their definition of felony and misdemeanor, and instead of having a misdemeanor be an offense that carries a sentence of up to 1 year, it's an offense that carries a sentence of up to 364 days. That 1 day change protects immigrants from this automatic deportation proposals in federal law. It's a bill we've been pushing for a few years now. It's become even more critical in light of what's going on. The Senate has passed the bill for the last 3 years it's been introduced. It's died in the House. Largely as a result of opposition from the Attorney General's office. But we're going to be working with a coalition of organizations. There's an immigrant coalition that has also made passage of this bill a priority. So we'll be spending a lot of time on that. Moving on, we will now go to Representative Speakman's bill, which we are grateful for her help on it.
Yes, so this bill, I think I've put in 4 times now? 3 times, right? It passed the House last year, 69 to nothing, and it did not pass the Senate. So it's in again. I put it in last week. So this bill defines the conditions under which a device that a student has at home that is used for educational purposes, so it's a Chromebook that the student got from school, brings home, or under what conditions can the school open that device? outside of school hours, right? And this, the answer is not, under not very many conditions can the school open the device outside of school hours. You can imagine scenarios in which if the school system had absolute authority to open a device at any time of day or night, there could be abuses. And in fact, when Steve testifies on this, he always starts with a story of a situation in which someone with ill intentions did open a student's computer to observe her while she was undressing and asleep. So this would constrain school districts from opening the devices under only under certain conditions. For example, if the district got a call from another student saying, my friend just said she's going to enter life, they could possibly open there. And again, it's technical language that has evolved over the years, actually. It again received unanimous support in the Internet and Technology Committee in the House, and then unanimous vote on the floor. So we're hopeful for this year. And I thank Steve for allowing me to sponsor the bill once again.
Thanks for getting it through the House. So we're just going to I'm going to very quickly go over a few other bills that we'll be supporting this year. And if you want more details, I encourage you to go to our website. The first is the Comprehensive Community Police Relationship Act. So this is a law that actually passed in 2000 that required police departments to collect traffic stop data. It was an attempt to prove that racial profiling occurs in police law enforcement, and the analyses every year that the analysis was done confirmed that. Unfortunately, when the bill was last amended in 2015, it had a 5-year sunset clause for stopping collecting of the data in 2020 because of the costs involved. Since 2020, we have been trying to get the law reinstated. I mean, it's really been a struggle. Police have been opposing the reinstatement of the data collection law. We are going to be doing all we can to get it back on track. Freedom to read. Bills were put in last year, and they're going to be reintroduced this year to strengthen protections against censorship attempts at libraries. As you know, Rhode Island is not immune from those efforts. A librarian in Westerly was actually threatened with an obscenity prosecution for not removing a few books from the school library. We think it's really important to pass this legislation to provide some protection to librarians across the state. Access to Public Records Act, it's been over a dozen years since there have been any comprehensive reforms to our open records law. A lot of things have changed in terms of technology and the ability to access records better. And what this bill does, it's being supported by a whole range of open government groups. It's designed to help better bring our open records law into the 21st century and make it easier for members of the public to gain access to records. It really is an incredibly critical way to make sure your government, you know what your government is doing and they're doing the right thing. Two other ones to quickly mention: abortion data privacy. This is a bill that we've been putting together. It's not a bill that's been introduced before. It's being introduced across the country. It's designed to limit those entities that collect data that is related to abortion or gender-affirming care from selling it, distributing it, making it available. That type of data has actually been used in a couple of the red states to prosecute women who've had abortions contrary to their state laws. So we think this is the newest important effort to try to protect reproductive freedom in Rhode Island, as well as gender-affirming care. And then finally, juvenile interrogation reform. This is a bill that we've pushed for a few years. It's passed the Senate a few times and died in the House because of police objections. It would bar the questioning of juvenile suspects without a parent or a legal guardian present. Ironically, there's a state law that we helped get passed about a dozen years ago that bars police in schools from interrogating students without parental or guardian consent But it's not the case if the student happens to be outside the school, is on the street, and a police officer stops and detains them. So this bill would correct that discrepancy and have it apply across the board. So those are just a few examples of bills that we'll be pushing in the General Assembly. And I want to mention one final thing. This is something that we just did this weekend. And this is a repeat of something we did 8 years ago during the first Trump administration. We drafted a model ordinance, immigrant protection ordinance, that we asked municipalities to adopt. And we're doing the same thing this year. It's a fairly comprehensive ordinance. It sets a variety of limitations on police and municipal cooperation with ICE. To give an example, it bars police from entering into these agreements. They're known as 287G agreements with the federal government, which act to deputize local law enforcement officials to serve as immigration agents. So we're hoping that interested city and town council members, interested community groups in all these communities will help us in getting these ordinances passed. You know, a lot of what's going on in DC is an attempt to intimidate cities and towns and states from doing things. There's a lot of bluster because there are real limits on what ICE can actually do. And it doesn't have the right to just go wherever it wants to, arrest whoever it wants to. And this is designed to put some teeth into making sure that municipalities don't help ICE when they are not required to. So I encourage you to go to our website beginning sometime Monday, when we'll be posting information. We'll be posting a copy of the proposed ordinance, a summary of it, and so forth. And you can start talking with people in your city or county council to encourage them to pass it if you're interested in doing that. So that's just, again, just a very small sample of some of the things we're working on. So that ends the formal presentation. Just some resources that you can go to: Secretary of State, the legislative website, our website, which has some of the materials that are in your handout, some of the advocacy materials, some of the things we talked about today. And then this is our legislative page. As I said, by the end of the session, there'll probably be 100 bills that you can click on and get copies of our testimony.
Could you go back to that website?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
So before we get to questions, let me make a few other final things, and then we'll open it up. First, I want to thank two of my staff people who are here: Zoe Chikoyan, who's been with me at the State House every night once you start actually doing your business. I want to thank Vimala and Representative Speakman. Please give them a hand. And there are additional materials out in the back on the table there. There's food there. More importantly, there's membership, donation information available. If you care about what we're doing, please donate. We need your help, especially now. With all those announcements, now let's try to get as many questions in as we can. I hope to be as concise as possible so we can hear as many as you.
How worried are you about a national constitutional convention?
So the question was, how worried am I about a national constitutional convention? I'm worried. One of the things that I'm most happy about is that the voters clearly rejected the opportunity for a state constitutional convention just this past November. It was something you put a lot of effort into. It was absolutely critical because the state constitution, if you're concerned about a national constitutional convention, you should be even more concerned about a state constitutional convention. The last one in Rhode Island passed a bunch of anti-abortion constitutional amendments, and we would have expected the same if it happened. The national one is of just as great concern. What's going to happen, I have no idea. but there are a lot of people pushing against it, and if we have to deal with that, we're in real trouble. That's all.
So thanks for doing this. There's a lot of motivated people here looking to get involved. I know there's a lot of organizations already that have bills going. I was wondering if, before people leave, there could be a moment that leaders of organizations could identify themselves to say what they're working on. It doesn't need to even be in here, but yeah, I don't know, like we're here with DARE doing probation reform. Nothing's over there if you want to get involved.
Let's leave that to the end. I think it's a good idea, but we can leave it to the very end so we can hear people's questions.
I was wondering, cost were mentioned once. Is there any place on the legislator side or some of the advocate sides that say kind of an estimate of the cost of implementing any of the bills that you're trying to advocate for?
So every bill that has dollars involved has to receive a fiscal note from the House Fiscal Office. That goes into the record as for consideration. Often those bills will go to House Finance, which has the biggest bill inventory of any committee. I actually oppose that. I wish they would go to the substantive committee so we can talk about the pros and cons of the idea and then talk about how much it will cost. But that's, I'm not a speaker. So, but yeah, there's a fiscal note that accompanies almost all legislation.
Can you, like for instance, even the privacy thing for the computers, I support that, but one of my questions is how much does that cost to implement? The schools are on such tough figures.
The student computer privacy bill costs nothing, which is why it was not assigned to finance.
But so where do we find those fiscal notes if we want to look at them?
There is a whole set. If you go to the home page of the General Assembly site, there's a link to, I think it says House Finance Committee or Finance Committee documents. And there you'll find a lot of the budget documents that the governor submits, a whole bunch of other material. And somewhere, I mean, there's a lot to get to go through there, but that's the place I would look for that sort of information.
Thank you.
Would it be worth it to have another event such as this to have people who are interested to maybe not as informed about what we can do on a federal level as well? So how do we engage against or advocacy for the issues that are involved at the federal level?
Yeah, I think we have bandwidth issues on that level, but there's certain, again, depending on the particular issues you're interested in. I mean, we generally rely on our national office to work at the federal level, and we focus on the state level. But again, there are lots of different organizations, depending on the issue, that may very well be a lot more heavily involved at the federal level than we are here locally. So I'd encourage you to check with them.
And I would also say email Jack Reed and Sheldon Whitehouse about the nominations. I've done it. I mean, they have a student intern who keeps track of how much they hear from their state. I don't know if it makes any difference to them, but I would just take out all the arrows in your quiver, and whoever your rep is, whether it's magazine or Alma, I would just send them an email. They can keep track of it.
I'm a psychologist in the community, and I often get questions from my clients about if there's a national abortion ban, if there is a national ban on gender-affirming care, what ability does a state have to resist that, or like what is the process of recourse? Is there any way to push back against a federal action on that level?
Yes, again, it's similar to the immigration issues I talked about. There are only certain things that the federal government can do to commandeer, that's the legal term, to commandeer states into doing things that they want them to do. So just to give an example on the immigration side, in the first Trump administration, they attempted to condition the granting of various federal funds to municipalities based on their immigration policies. And the city of Providence and the city of Central Falls sued, and the federal appeals court said no, the federal government went too far. So it depends on the particulars. I can't give you a blanket answer, but the fact that the federal government has said something or said it's going to do something, it won't necessarily affect what's going on at the state level, just like the abortion issue, where the Supreme Court has said there is no right, but here in Rhode Island you have an absolute right to have that.
Thank you.
You mentioned a few times about some different bills that they'll sometimes, they seem to have like similar political agendas, but at sometimes they'll die in the House or die in the Senate. Like, it seems odd that, like, one bill would get passed in one area and then die in another and vice versa when they seem to be on, like, at least the bills seem to be on the same page. Like, I don't know if that's an easy question, but I'm just curious what you have to say.
It's not easy. Do you want to?
So each chamber has its own dynamics, right? By the way, leadership, the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate are very powerful and determine pretty much what goes on in their chamber. Bills don't pass unless those two leaders support those bills. So as much advocacy as you may do, as many impassioned speeches, that's not really my thing, but that I may make, if it's not supported upstairs, as we say, it's not going to move forward, right? And that's a very complicated story to tell, which could take an hour to unpack. So that's a really, the question, the story of each issue is independent from the other. There's no blanket answer to that. I mean, the assault weapons ban, we know it would pass if it comes to the House floor. We know it, because more than a majority signed on as sponsors. But yet, the governor put it in its budget. So what's going on there, right? And it's sort of, there's a bit of a curtain, and behind that curtain things happen, and they're not always obvious to folks like me. I know that's unsatisfactory, but it is what it is.
We both have daughters that are transgender and who are very, very worried right now. I mean, it's been a really tough week. My daughter is so scared. She travels all over the place. I've been trying to update her passport. She does have the right gender marker on there, but her name, the new name is not on there yet, so that still is going through paperwork. So she is afraid to travel just around the country and stuff like that. We're trying to figure out, I guess, how to be more of an advocate for our daughters, with all the uncertainty, everything going on.
Well, there certainly is uncertainty. I don't have any solution for that. I will say a few things. I mean, first, we can guarantee that there will be litigation over these various federal mandates or repeals that have taken place in the last week. And I know there will be vigorous attempts at getting them overturned. I would also emphasize, again, as I mentioned at the very beginning, the role of state and local government in providing protections. Rhode Island has very strong protections for the transgender community, and the federal government's attempt to restrict Title IX, which is a federal law that provides protection, has absolutely no bearing on state laws that provide that protection. They remain in effect. So it's important to realize that, again, there's only so much the federal government can do. It's not going to help when it comes to federal things like passports. That will require litigation to deal with that. But keep in mind, in Rhode Island, schools are required to protect transgender kids. State law prohibits discrimination on the basis of gender identity or expression. There are a lot of protections in place, and the federal government only has so much ability to undo those protections.